well, we're just going to do it this way then. So for those of you who do not know about Ripple, it is a multidisciplinary clinic in Washougal, and we offer naturopathic medicine, acupuncture, massage, nutrition, mental health counseling, and yoga and breath work. We offer regular community classes throughout the year. If you're not already on our email list, you can put your email in the chat to stay in the loop. So you can go ahead and do that at any time throughout the presentation, and we will go ahead and add you. This will be our last library talk for this year, and then we'll pick it up again in 2023. And now I'm going to throw it over to Justin to introduce himself.
Thanks, Emily. So good evening. My name is Justin. I'm the mental health counselor here at Ripple Wellness. A quick background about me: I went to Washington State, got my bachelor's of science degree in psychology. And then I went to Western Washington and got my master's degree in rehab counseling. And then I got my National Certified Counselor certificate. And more recently, I became licensed in mental health. So I do part-time mental health therapy at Ripple. I also work for the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, helping people with disabilities find employment. So I'm kind of working with a wide range of individuals, but love working here at Ripple, and I think we do really good work.
Awesome. And I'm Emily. I am the functional nutritionist at Ripple. I've been certified in functional nutrition since 2017 and working with clients since then. And so for those who don't know, functional nutrition is sort of a branch of functional medicine. So I very much look at the whole person and focus on individual nutrition needs. So it's not just blanket recommendations. I come up with customized plans for each of my clients. So I work with a variety of conditions, including a lot of, metabolic health conditions like type 2 diabetes, weight loss. I work with autoimmune conditions, hormone imbalance, kind of a broad spectrum. When it comes to mental health, I work primarily with anxiety, mood, energy, depression, and stress. And I find that even clients that come to me for other conditions often kind of have, something mental health wise going on that they kind of want to work on simultaneously, or that they find improves through our work together. And this is really how I personally became interested in nutrition. So when I was in my early to mid 20s, I made some diet changes, mostly just for fun as a challenge to myself. And the biggest thing that happened for me was actually I saw shifts in my mental health. So I noticed my mood improved, and my anxiety, came down a lot. So that was really what drove me into learning more about nutrition and coming down this path. So that's why I'm especially interested in this topic. And then I just want to mention before we get started, this information is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. And food can have profound impacts on our health outcomes, but the nutrition changes that you may make are not a substitute for your prescribed medications or for working with a healthcare professional. And now I'm going to throw it over to Justin to talk about what he sees in his practice.
So thanks, Emily. I will be talking about how food affects our mental health and how they work together. So to start off, sugar and processed foods can actually lead to inflammation throughout the body and brain. This may contribute to mood disorders, including anxiety and depression. So when we're feeling stressed or depressed, we often reach for processed foods and search for a quick pick-me-up. However, this may actually lead to anxious feelings because there's not a lot of healthy ingredients in those foods. So we also might tend to either eat too much or too little when we're feeling depressed or stressed. That's kind of a coping mechanism that sometimes we tend to do when we're feeling stressed, anxiety about, things in our life. We might tend not to eat or maybe overeat. So when we eat too much, we find ourselves feeling sluggish and often gain weight as well. When we eat too little, though, we may feel exhausted because we're not fueling our system with enough nutrients to give our cells energy. So we really want to focus on eating plenty of fruits and vegetables, also nuts, seeds, and beans. All right, you can go next slide. All right, so this slide is all about healthy brain foods. So healthy brain foods include complex carbohydrates and lean proteins. So you can actually go to the next slide now. I'm going to show you guys, this is a visual of complex carbohydrates and lean proteins. So complex carbs, examples such as are rice, starchy vegetables, and these can give you energy and support brain health. Lean proteins also lend energy, and they allow our body to think and react quickly. So good sources of protein include chicken, meat, fish, eggs, soybeans, nuts, and seeds. Right. So here's some, let's see here. So we want to make sure that we eat mindfully. I think as a therapist, a lot of work I do with clients is being mindful. It's really important, especially when we have trauma in our life, anxiety in our life, depression in our life. Being mindful is really important, and it takes practice. So when it comes to eating and nutrition, we also want to eat mindfully. So we want to pay attention to how you feel when you eat and what you eat. So if you find yourself overeating when you're stressed, it may be helpful to stop what you're doing when the urge arises. It may help to actually write down how you're feeling in the moment. So documenting what, where, and when you eat is a great way to develop insight of your eating patterns. All right, mindfulness continued. Next slide. Changing any behavioral habit is difficult. It requires you to know what actions you want to change and when you want to change them, and what alternative actions you want to do instead. So the hardest step is remembering what you want to change, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed by your emotions. So again, being mindful, being in that moment is very important. Sometimes our first reaction when we get overwhelmed is to act impulsively. So this may include overeating, not eating, or just eating the wrong foods. So how do you prepare to make a healthier decision when you're feeling overwhelmed? So the next slide, which I like to do with my clients, is it's a mindfulness exercise called Take a Rest. So this is a distress tolerance exercise. Now, distress tolerance is being able to get through an emotional incident without making it worse. So when it comes to maybe post-traumatic stress disorder, we want to develop positive emotions that we can do when we start feeling when we're being mindful and we start feeling our body start to tense up. Maybe we get hot, sweaty. We want to learn how to tolerate our stress in the moment so we don't get to a point of fight, flight, or freeze, which obviously can relate to nutrition as well, because that might be our escape, is maybe eating too much or too little. So distress tolerance, again, it's being able to get through an emotional incident without making it worse. So the acronym I like to use is called REST, and it stands for relax, evaluate, set an intention, and take action. And the next slide. All right, so the first step is to relax. Stop what you're doing, freeze, take a breath, pause, step away from the situation for a few seconds to get a better perspective on what's going on. The second step is to evaluate. So ask yourself, what is happening in the situation? What are the facts? Just do a quick evaluation. For example, what is happening to you physically, emotionally, and mentally? And the third step is to set an intention. So we want to set an intention to do something. and to take action. So decide which action you're going to take. So choose a coping skill. And these are things that we work on in therapy, trying to find the right coping skills for you that work to help you tolerate stress in challenging situations. So maybe it's going for a walk, maybe it's reading a book. Folding laundry is actually a really big one. In fact, it increases our our positive emotions. So, if we're feeling really overwhelmed, maybe we want to go and eat or something, maybe eat the wrong foods. Folding laundry, it's something you can start and finish and you feel accomplished. And that feeling is building positive emotions. So that's just one example I like to elaborate on. So what do you need in that moment right now is really what step 3 is all about. And the last step is to take action. So put your plan into motion. Proceed mindfully, which means move ahead slowly and with awareness of what you're doing. So whatever your intentions were in the last step, do it now as calmly and effectively as you can. All right, Emily, passing
Awesome.
over to
Thank you, Justin. I love that REST acronym. I've never heard of that before. So that's very cool. All right. So now I'm going to talk about some of the things that I work with in my practice with my clients. And I would say, by and large, the biggest one is blood sugar. So blood sugar balance, we now know actually relates to a lot of health conditions because unbalanced blood sugar drives inflammation. And inflammation is linked to all sorts of chronic health conditions, both physical and mental. So, like I said, I come up with customized treatment plans for all of my clients, but I would say with 95% of them, blood sugar is one of the first foundational things that we work on. And that's because blood sugar, it impacts cravings, weight gain, energy levels, and our mood. And for a lot of people, it can also trigger feelings of anxiety. So I included this graphic here just so you can get a visual of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a blood sugar spike and a dip and what's going on. So in this graphic here, you see the lower half that's green, right? And that's like where you are with your baseline blood sugar, and it can go up a little bit. If you go above 30 points over your baseline blood sugar, that will send you into this red zone, which is considered a spike, okay? So in this instance, the person is eating a bowl of cereal with skim milk, which is basically just straight carbohydrates. Not a lot of protein in there, not a lot of healthy fats, just straight carbohydrates. So they eat the cereal, and then you see their blood sugar rise up into that red zone, the spike zone. And then an hour or so, 60 to 90 minutes later, it starts coming back down. And it doesn't just return to baseline, but it actually dips below baseline. And that is, some of us might know it as hypoglycemia. That's when our blood sugar is dipping below baseline. And what that feels like is you might feel shaky, jittery, anxious. You might start sweating. You might be irritable. Like if you've ever been hangry, you've probably had low blood sugar, which most of us have. Right. And then what happens there is, in an attempt to get your body back to baseline, your body kind of sends out the alarm system. Right. And you typically crave sugar or carbohydrates in this time. And, rightfully so, that's what your body should be doing because it wants to bring you back up to baseline, but then it'll shoot up again. And so if you've ever heard of the blood sugar roller coaster, that's exactly what it is, where we spike our blood sugar, we fall, we eat what we need to come back up, but we go too high and then we come back down. So that's unbalanced blood sugar. When it dips too low, what's happening in your body is your body starts pumping out adrenaline, which triggers the glucose production and release from your liver. And that's your fight or flight response. So basically, you're having a very nervous system based reaction when your blood sugar is too low. And like I mentioned, the symptoms of low blood sugar often mirror symptoms of anxiety. So people, maybe feel anxious and they really don't know why. And it could simply be low blood sugar. And then in the long term, chronic low blood sugar levels can cause elevated cortisol levels, which is our stress hormone, which we need in times of stress so that everything, we can make the appropriate action. But when that goes on chronically, when it's elevated chronically, that's when it can start to cause problems for people. So blood sugar is definitely one of the baseline things that I like to start with, because if you have balanced blood sugar, you have better energy levels, you have a better mood, you tend to make more mindful decisions around food, like Justin was talking about, like when we're in that kind of like stress or panic and we either don't eat or we eat the wrong things, and we kind of have that opposite reaction of what we want. So that's blood sugar. The other thing is nutrient deficiencies. And this is really interesting because a lot of people are familiar with macronutrients, right? That's protein, fats, and carbohydrates. And there's a lot of emphasis of like, oh, track your macros. And there's a lot of familiarity around those. We don't talk about micronutrients so much. And those are the minerals that we need in really small amounts, but we still need them to be functioning optimally. So actually, very interesting. If you guys are looking at my camera, I'm holding up a book, but I'm going to say it out loud. It's called The Better Brain. It's by 2 female doctors, and it's about overcoming anxiety, combating depression, and reducing ADHD and stress with nutrition. And basically their whole thesis is that, so many of these mental conditions and challenges that we're facing is not just one nutrient deficiency or one thing, but it's kind of like a broad spectrum nutrient deficiency. Very interesting book, highly recommend. But why are we experiencing these nutrient deficiencies? There's a couple reasons why. First is the standard American diet that most of us eat, right? And so that's a lot of processed foods, a lot of foods where they have the fiber and the nutrients removed, heavy on carbohydrates, heavy on sugars. So there's just not a lot of nutrient density in these kinds of foods, right? So just based on diet alone, a lot of us aren't getting the micronutrients that we need to thrive. And then second is our farming practices. So the minerals that end up in our food come from the soil that they're grown in. So the way that we monocrop and over farm over time depletes nutrient levels in our soil. And there's, more and more studies coming out about this too, where the nutrient density of our food is lower than it was even 50 years ago because of how it's being grown. So if you have the ability to grow your own food or access to a smaller local farm, you will have typically more nutrient dense food because they're going to be using hopefully we'll have better soil practices than big monocrops. So I just want to highlight a few key nutrients for mental health. But before I do, I also want to mention that both in science and kind of like nutrition science and the media, there's kind of a focus on singular nutrients. So I think a lot of us think that way. And I did for a long time as well. We're like, oh, vitamin C for immunity and, calcium for this and whatever else for this. So we kind of have this like singular focus on nutrients. But I do want to mention a lot of them work synergistically together. So that's why this hypothesis about having like a broad spectrum nutrient deficiency is really interesting, because it's not just a one deficiency that's going to make or break us. It's kind of like an overall deficiency. That being said, some of the nutrients that I've seen are key for mental health are, first, vitamin D has a lot of functions in the body, but in terms of supporting mood, it's one of the best. Most of us are deficient in it because the best way to get it is to be outside in the sunshine, because when the sun hits our skin, it synthesizes that vitamin D. That's the best and most efficient way for our body to get vitamin D. But a lot of us don't go outside, or we wear a lot of sunscreen, or we cover up, or whatever the reason is, we're just not getting enough. But that can be a game changer for mood. I know it was for me personally. Growing up, it was always like a little bit of the seasonal depression I would get. It was just like feeling unmotivated, just lower mood. I'd always gain a little bit of weight. And then, my senior year in college, I wasn't even that into nutrition. I was like into health a little bit, not that into nutrition at that point, but I had heard a lot about vitamin D, and I was like, I'm going to try a vitamin D supplement this winter. And it was a total game changer for me. I didn't lose that motivation that I normally lose. I had a better mood and I didn't gain that weight. So I'm definitely a sucker on vitamin D. And this is now a good time to be aware of your vitamin D levels as we move into the darker months. Magnesium is a mineral that is probably my favorite. It's very cool. It's a cofactor in over 300 chemical reactions in our body. So it does a lot. Again, the majority of us are deficient in it. Stress depletes our magnesium levels really easily, right? And we're all stressed and definitely have been for the last couple of years. And it can be really, like I said, it serves a lot of functions in the body. When it comes to mental health, it can be really great for stress support, and for anxiety too. So it can really help people with feelings of anxiety. It can help us sleep better. So love magnesium. Dark leafy greens are one of the best food sources for it. And then there's the option to supplement as well. And then omega-3 fatty acids, really another great nutrient. So the function of omega-3 fatty acids in our body is that they have high anti-inflammatory activity. So like Justin mentioned, inflammation is oftentimes linked to mental health conditions. There's actually a very large body of evidence when it comes to depression being basically an inflammatory condition. So that's, becoming, I'm seeing more and more about it. So it's becoming a little bit more widely accepted. And omega-3 fatty acids have incredible anti-inflammatory activity. And one of the best sources for that is wild-caught salmon. We have plant sources as well, but they're not, the omega-3s that are in those plant sources are not easily absorbed by us humans. So animal sources tend to be better in terms of actually absorbing the omega-3s. And then can't talk about mental health without talking about the gut. Can't really talk about anything without talking about the gut anymore, because now we know that it's so connected to so many different health conditions. But the research on the gut and mental health has been super interesting. So just to give you like a quick recap, right? There's a couple ways this can kind of work, right? So we each have our own unique microbiome, and we all have good bacteria and we all have bad bacteria. It's not bad to have bad bacteria, but you just want the numbers to be right. So you want to have more good bacteria than bad bacteria, because when those bad bacteria are high in numbers, they can become pathogenic, and that's what can cause infections and make us sick. And that's called gut dysbiosis. So we all have our microbiomes. There's a reduction in microbiome content, so the amount of good bacteria, and diversity, so the different kinds of good bacteria, in people who are experiencing stress and people who are depressed, compared to the microbiomes of people who don't have that. So that's really interesting. And, maybe you've heard somewhere about, this is just like a very stark example, but they've done studies where they show that the microbiomes in obese people are significantly different than the microbiomes of healthy weight people. And they can do a fecal transplant where they basically like put the microbiome contents of the healthy person into the obese person, and they'll lose weight just based on the microbiome alone. So there's a lot of power in our microbiome, and we all have different ones. But it's just interesting that they've noted these patterns in people who are depressed or people who are stressed. There's a clear difference. And then gut dysbiosis is common in people that are diagnosed with mental health conditions. So that's, again, having basically just out of whack levels. You're having more bad bacteria than good bacteria. You want those good guys strong in there. And then another mechanism of the gut that impacts mental health is that it modulates inflammation. So that's a big thing too, not just in mental health conditions, but with any sort of physical ailment. With autoimmune conditions, leaky gut is a really big deal, and inflammation is a really big deal. So if you have a gut that's got a lot of the good bacteria, you're going to have a better inflammatory response versus someone with a gut who has more of the dysbiosis and the bad bacteria. So that is the gut. And I'm going to throw it back over to Justin for his top 3 tips when it comes to mental health and nutrition.
All right. So my top 3 tips, again, back to being mindful. So we want to eat mindfully. So be aware of what you're eating, how much you're eating or how little we're eating, because it affects our mental health. So again, mindfulness, very important when it comes to mental health as well, and dealing with other things in our life. My second tip is to stay hydrated. This is really important. I would encourage people to drink at least 100 milliliters of water a day, at least. Staying hydrated helps your brain cells communicate with each other. It clears out toxins and waste, which actually impairs brain function. And it also carries nutrients to your brain. So stay hydrated is number 2. And 3 is be aware of how caffeine can affect your mood. It can actually cause sleep problems, especially when you drink it too close to bed. Lack of sleep causes us to have anxiety and depression. And obviously, drinking caffeine, it's going to help make it difficult to sleep. We should be getting at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep a day. That's kind of the general amount. Any less or any more can actually be, it can cause other issues as well. So some people also find that caffeine makes them irritable and anxious as well. And caffeine is found in coffee, tea, soda, and even chocolate. So those are my 3 tips. I'm giving it back to Emily.
Thank you, Justin. I will totally, well, I have one that's actually the same as yours, but the hydration thing is so big too. Like if you're ever feeling kind of off, just drink some water and you might feel better. Okay, my top 3 tips now. So I will say it again, balancing the blood sugar. This is where I start with a lot of my clients. And it's one of those things, it's like, you can start doing it literally right now, today, to start feeling a difference in your energy levels, your mood, and it'll impact you long-term as well. So this is one of my favorite tips. So what does that actually look like? So that looks like including a source of protein, healthy fat, and fiber at each meal. This is kind of like the complete thing that's gonna, keep your blood sugar levels stable. So you can think of it as a PFF meal, if that's easier for you to remember. And I will emphasize the importance of breakfast here. Everyone is going to, the ideal time for someone to eat breakfast, it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. So I'm not tied to like a certain time that you should be eating breakfast, but I do encourage you to really prioritize this meal formula at breakfast, because that's going to set you up for a day of steady energy levels and, mood support and everything like that. Because if you start your day with a bagel or donuts or cereal, you're going into that spike zone right away. You're coming down, and then you're going to do what your body wants you to do, which is go for the carbs and quick energy again to come back up. And that sets you up for that roller coaster all day long. So I would really encourage you to especially implement this sort of formula at breakfast. And then eat regularly. So if you were listening to any kind of nutrition advice in the 90s or early 2000s, you've probably heard like eat 2 to 3 small meals, or eat every 2 to 3 hours, like 6 meals a day, right? And that's actually it. And it was kind of like in the name of keeping your metabolism going and losing weight, right? But if you're actually hungry every 2 to 3 hours and you're like needing to eat every 2 to 3 hours, your blood sugar is probably dysregulated and not actually that stable. So I want you to be going more like 3 to 5 hours comfortably between meals, because then that tells me that you ate enough protein, healthy fats, and fiber at your last meal to actually keep you satisfied and satiated to your next meal. So you want to be kind of like comfortably hungry. And then I also wanted to touch on intermittent fasting, because it's such a popular tool and kind of fad nutrition thing that's going on right now. And that's when you intentionally skip meals. It has a lot of really positive uses for a lot of people. But if you're prone to anxiety, or you're currently in a very stressful phase of your life, don't fast or skip meals, because it's an additional stressor on your body. And, under normal circumstances where you're like strong and healthy and not stressed, it can have really positive impacts, but it can actually, make things worse and impact your energy levels. Or if you're dealing with any sort of like adrenal fatigue or anything like that, I would not advise fasting or skipping meals. Caffeine, I'm going to back Justin up on the caffeine thing, because for some people, caffeine's the sole trigger of their anxiety and they just don't even realize it because they've been drinking caffeine for so long. Right. So I would strongly recommend to kind of take stock of like where you're getting caffeine from, because a lot of us will be like, oh, I'm drinking 1 cup of coffee a day, but your 1 cup of coffee is actually like a 30-ounce Yeti, which is more like, 4 cups of coffee. So really, pay attention to that. Are you drinking tea? Are you drinking sodas, chocolate? Like, where might this caffeine be coming in and how late are you eating it? So I would encourage you, if anxiety is something that you're working with and working on, try eliminating or reducing your caffeine to see how you feel. I would do like a taper method. Definitely stop drinking it. I personally try to stop drinking it before noon, but some people say like 2 or 3 p.m. And then there's a few best practices that you can kind of work with caffeine so that you can still have it. So instead of waking up, drinking coffee on an empty stomach and then, starting about your day, which is going to have a big impact on your nervous system, try having it alongside breakfast or after breakfast or your first meal of the day. Or you could add some fat or protein to it. So if you've heard of bulletproof coffee, you usually add a source of fat and some collagen protein. And that can kind of blunt the caffeine response and blunt the caffeine hitting your system. So that'll kind of reduce that jittery feeling. That's what I do personally. I don't love eating first thing in the morning. If I wake up hungry, I will, but I usually wait an hour or two. But I will have a half calf coffee and I add collagen protein and MCT oil to it. And that allows me to drink it and enjoy it without feeling like jittery or anxious. And I also think there's value in just like regular caffeine breaks too, to kind of check in with yourself and see how it's making you feel. And then my third tip is anti-inflammatory foods. So this is kind of general, but it's when it comes to health and nutrition, especially, it's really about the things that you're doing daily, that you're doing all the time. So I would really encourage you to incorporate anti-inflammatory foods regularly. So what I do with my clients is I have a list of anti-inflammatory foods that I send to them, and I tell them to put it on their fridge. And whenever they're going to the grocery store or, kind of planning out their meal prep, just have them take a glance at that list and pick like 1 or 2 to pick up at the grocery store and just make sure that they have on hand and kind of incorporate through their week. We know that inflammation is linked to so many health conditions, including mental health conditions. So this is just one of the most powerful things you can do. And the more often you're doing it and the more regularly you're doing it, the more impact it's going to have. So some of my favorite anti-inflammatory foods are wild-caught salmon, dark leafy greens, blueberries, turmeric, ginger, and green tea. And then we just want to say one thing.
Yeah, so this is our disclaimer. And first, I want to make a correction. I said 100 milliliters. I meant ounces. So my apologies. It's been a very long day. But our disclaimer, so sometimes stress and depression are so severe, it can't be managed alone. So if this is the case, seek professional counseling, ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness or failure. I think I'm a huge advocate in asking for help. If I have questions, I ask for help. And so I really want to encourage everybody, if you need extra guidance and assistance, reach out to Ripple. Let's schedule an appointment, because we can't manage everything alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And on that note, if you would like to take a deeper dive with either Justin or myself, here is Ripple's information. We've got a website, email, and phone number. And we just want to let you know we're both telehealth only. So that means we take clients virtually on a video call. And if you have more personal questions for us after tonight's presentation, or just want to see if we're a good fit, we both offer free 15-minute consults. So you can set that up through Ripple and we can just chat with you and, make sure we can help you with what you're looking for and make sure it's a good fit. And with that, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are super passionate about this topic, and there's really a lot of things that you can do to shift your diet and your approach to the way that you eat to support your mental health. So we really appreciate you being here. And we are now going to open it up to questions. So you can type your question in the chat, raise your hand, or just turn your mic on and ask away. And we are happy to answer your questions as best as we can.
Can I ask you, what is a really good example of a healthy food you could eat when your blood sugar's low?
Yeah, that's a good question.
There's probably a lot, but like a fruit.
Right.
So when some fruits are really high in sugar.
Yes. So with fruit, so what I would recommend is doing like something like an apple or a banana, but pairing it with a healthy fat or a protein. So I would pair it with like an almond butter or peanut butter or a handful of walnuts or something like that. So you're not just getting the, the carbohydrate hits, you'll still be getting them, but it won't be such a severe impact on it. So that would be a good one. I like having a piece of fruit because it will help bring your blood sugar up, but then having something else will kind of blunt that response.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
What did you say? You took the screen off really fast. Incorporate these regularly for anti-inflammatory foods. Wild-caught salmon, dark leafy greens, blueberries, ginger, and green tea. Was that it?
Yep. And turmeric is a really potent anti-inflammatory as well. And one of my favorite ways to incorporate turmeric is if you like curry. So if you like curry dishes, that's something I routinely recommend to clients just to get in, because you're getting in, a source of protein. If you put some meat in there, you're getting some healthy fats from coconut milk. Usually there's vegetables in it, so you're getting, a lot of nutrients that way. And then in the curry, there's the turmeric, and that's super anti-inflammatory. So I love doing that. And then, okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
What would be a good start to the day sort of breakfast that will not cause a major blood sugar spike? Can you give me some examples?
Yes. So if you eat eggs are great, a great source of protein. And then I love pairing them with a vegetable that could be some leafy greens or even some like roasted sweet potatoes for kind of a complex carbohydrate. And then a healthy fat like avocado would be really good in that instance. I also like doing skillets, for lack of a better word, but some kind of like a sausage or a ground meat mixed up with other vegetables. And it can be really whatever you want. I like sweet potatoes a lot. So, and they're, relatively blood sugar friendly when paired with other things. So doing like sweet potato, onions, bell peppers, and then some like ground beef or ground pork with spices in there. And then if you're more of a sweet person, you could do like a Greek yogurt, because that's high in protein, with some berries. And again, I'd recommend some nuts or seeds or like a nut butter or something for some healthy fats in there. And if you don't like yogurt or you don't do dairy, then I love chia pudding, which is just a mixture of chia seeds and a liquid of your choice that's usually a non-dairy milk. And you kind of do the same thing with some fruit and some nut butter. And that's a really good alternative as well. Is that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Perfect. And then Allison said Ripple had a recipe for golden milk. That was my recipe in their recent newsletter. And that's also a good turmeric source. Absolutely. And so for those who don't know, golden milk is an Ayurvedic tonic, which consists of milk. I use a coconut milk, turmeric, and then you can add other spices like ginger and cinnamon in there. And it's really warming and tasty. And it's got a lot of anti-inflammatory and digestive benefits.
Lots of nutrition questions.
All right. And then I did have somebody ask about if I work with parents of children who might be exhibiting signs of a blood sugar roller coaster, and the answer is absolutely. I think it's important to, establish healthier habits when we're younger, because as we know, a lot of our food habits when we're children kind of shape our food habits as adults, and it takes a lot of work to change them. So I think honestly, the earlier we can start just showing our kids, healthier habits and like having a healthy relationship with food, I think that can be super helpful.
Yeah, and I got that question as well. So, I mean, parents of young children who are exhibiting behavioral issues. So that's something where Emily and I can do sort of a wraparound approach and work together, separately or together with families experiencing those issues.
Yeah, definitely. It can be like kind of tag teaming this approach with like the kind of support and care and like coping mechanisms that Justin can address along with dietary changes can be really profound, because they kind of like, you know what I mean? Like changing what you eat is likely won't completely resolve, like it might improve your mental health, but like if you don't know how to cope with the issues when they come up, it's only going to get you so far. And same vice versa, if you cope but you're like not changing your physiology to be the healthiest that it can be, it's going to be so the double approach is really good. So somebody asked, how do you check someone's blood sugar? Do you have someone wear a monitor? So people can take their own blood sugar at home with the finger prick, right? And now continuous glucose monitors are more common and accessible, right? So that's where you have basically a little device that you wear on your arm, and it's usually linked to an app, and it'll track your blood sugar levels all day long. And that's really useful for, really getting insight into your blood sugar levels and what's happening. So I have some clients that already have those and they're wearing them, so we can use that information. But generally I don't, track anyone's blood sugar, but a really good indicator is how you feel several hours after a meal, like 60 to 90 minutes after a meal. If you're starting to feel hungry again, or if you're starting to kind of feel anxious or have an energy dip or feel like shaky or jittery or hangry, that's a pretty good indication that the meal that you ate was not supporting your blood sugar. So, and actually I had a talk about blood sugar with our naturopathic doctor last month. And this naturopathic doctor, Dr. Kelly, said that's kind of the best way to gauge is like go by how you feel. You can track your blood sugar and wear the continuous glucose monitor, and it's super helpful. But you don't necessarily need to. You can kind of feel when your blood sugar is dipping as well. Okay, and then I've got another question here about, have you seen children whose ADHD is exacerbated by their dietary issues like hypoglycemia? So I haven't personally seen it, but I have read a lot about it. So there's a surprising amount of dietary interventions that you can take for ADHD. And I would say that, blood sugar is definitely a big one. And just from reading about it, it seems like blood sugar definitely plays a part in that.
And I have seen children and individuals with ADHD who tend to drink a lot of caffeine because it does the opposite effect. I wouldn't recommend that, especially when we're talking about caffeine, mental health, getting a good night's sleep. We don't really want to do stuff like that. So I would say definitely, talk to your doctor about that, or work on it in mental health counseling.
Mm-hmm. Oh, awesome. And the library says that the book that I mentioned, The Better Brain, is available to check out through the library for those who are interested. Let's see. Okay. Yep. So somebody just asked if we have recommendations for books for the diet as related to ADHD. So this one that I just mentioned, The Better Brain, does touch on ADHD. And then also, this is another good book. This is Your Brain on Food. She also touches on ADHD in here. So The Better Brain and This is Your Brain on Food, I would definitely recommend.
All right.
Anybody else for questions? You're welcome, Allison.
Yes.
Who's the author of both those books?
Yeah, so This is Your Brain on Food. It's Uma Naidoo, Naidoo. And then The Better Brain is Bonnie Kaplan and Julia Ruckledge.
Thank you.
Mhm. This is Your Brain on Food is also available at the library. Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. I know everybody's very busy, so it means a lot that you guys come and sit and listen to us. So this is great. But if you guys, want to schedule appointments or have more questions, feel free to reach out to Ripple on their website. They have our contact information as well. So yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. This is such a fun topic. I could literally talk about this for days.
Thank you everyone for coming this evening. I will be sending out the recording that will also have the chat tomorrow. So if you want to watch this again or go over the slides, all of that will be sent to you via email tomorrow. So thank you so much, and I hope you all have a good evening.